After my last video explaining transhumanism, its purpose, and its rationale, there was a wide variety of responses from people with questions, criticisms, and some very interesting points that ought to be addressed. Obviously, there are certain aspects of transhumanism that require clarification, and I'd like to explore some of the major objections that were raised. Some people pointed out that science and technology haven't always had beneficial results. Sometimes technological developments have undesirable outcomes, and we may encounter similar issues with future technology as well. And that's a valid concern. Technological progress is not an ethic unto itself, nor is it inherently good. But that's not what transhumanism is about. Instead, transhumanism recognizes that there are many ways in which human existence could be much better than it is now, and supports the ethical and humane use of technology as a means to accomplish this. But the possibility of negative consequences stemming from certain technologies is not a reason to abandon all attempts at progress. It never has been. Just as technology isn't inherently good, it's not inherently bad either. There's no need to refrain from even trying to develop helpful technologies just because other uses of technology might be hazardous. Such an extreme degree of risk aversion rules out any progress, eliminating the benefits as well as the dangers. Rather than simply hiding from the future, we should proceed with our research while taking precautions appropriate to what we're dealing with. Others were concerned that technological advances could exacerbate social inequalities, as these new technologies could be unaffordable or otherwise inaccessible to some people. Now, transhumanism is not intended to benefit only the rich first world upper class. It is not a philosophy of exclusion. The fruits of transhumanism are meant to help humanity. That means anyone and everyone. But this issue is not specific to transhumanism. It can arise from any new developments, and it has. Does this mean that these developments are themselves a bad thing? No. The inequality is the problem. So, how do we remedy this? Do we relinquish any technology that others may not have access to in order to bring everyone down to the lowest common denominator? No. Instead, we work to provide assistance to as many people as possible so they have access to the same amenities that we do. And that's the goal of transhumanism as well. Some people took issue with the possibility of transhumanism putting an end to death, claiming this would lead to overpopulation. And this is definitely something to think about, because overpopulation is already a problem. Thousands of people die every day just because they don't have sufficient resources to survive, indicating that either the world simply doesn't have enough resources to support the current population, or these resources aren't being properly allocated. This is an issue we'll have to contend with regardless of transhumanism. Now, if death were to stop happening immediately, there would be about 150,000 extra people every day who would remain living when they would have otherwise died. Combined with the 350,000 people who are born every day, this would be significantly disruptive. But the end of death isn't going to happen overnight, and it won't take place in a vacuum. It's not going to be the only thing that will change about society. The same advances that allow humans to exist in a form that isn't subject to death, or at least death by aging, will likely enable a far more efficient utilization of resources, or it could lead to the use of entirely different resources. It might also make it possible for us to survive in environments that are uninhabitable to human life in its present form, such as perhaps other planets. Now, if indefinite lifespans are undesirable due to the potential for overpopulation, this raises a difficult question. If lifespan should be finite to prevent overpopulation, what lifespan would be optimal to achieve this? What age should we be limited to? And how would we enforce this? The position that we ought to die may pose even greater ethical challenges than the position that we shouldn't have to. Others have suggested that death gives meaning to life, and that life would have no purpose if it did not end at some point. And for some people, this may be true. But the meaning of life is a personal and subjective view, and it's different for everyone. Where you find meaning may not be the same for somebody else. There are plenty of shiftless people who face eventual death just like the rest of us, but it doesn't seem to have given their lives any particular meaning. Indeed, many of them are content to never even think about the meaning of their lives. And while a limited lifespan may compel some people to pursue their interests, knowing they have only a limited time to do so, this doesn't mean their interests would become any less compelling if their lives were endless. They may find these pursuits to be inherently gratifying, and and not because they eventually won't be able to enjoy them. Is comfort only enjoyable because of pain? Would it be meaningless without pain? I've had a lot of migraine headaches throughout my life, and the times when I don't have a headache are pleasurable by their own virtue. If I never had a migraine again, I would still find this quite satisfying. There are many people who won't ever experience a migraine, but this does nothing to diminish their enjoyment of being free from severe and nauseating pain. Do we find joy in having legs only because it's possible that we'll become paralyzed or have them amputated at some point? No. Having legs is enjoyable in and of itself. We have no need for the contrast of disability to make the experience meaningful. There are some people whose priorities shift radically when they find out they have only 6 months to live, and they may focus on enjoying their remaining time as much as possible. But this doesn't mean that unexpected terminal disease is a good thing. If the end of life is what gives it meaning, have our lives become less meaningful as we've lived longer and pushed death further and further back? Would our lives have greater meaning if our lifespan was reduced by half? I'm sure there are some who might agree with this, but there are many others who don't. Some of us find being alive inherently pleasant, and we would like to enjoy our lives for as long as possible. If the meaning of your life depends on your eventual death, then by all means choose death. You have every right to make that choice for yourself, and transhumanists won't stop you. But it is a personal choice, and nobody is entitled to impose the meaning of their life on everyone else, least of all by demanding that they die. Some people claim that the objectives of transhumanism are unrealistic, or that we just aren't smart enough to figure out how to accomplish these goals. And it may be the case that in our present state, we are not intelligent enough to solve the problems of overpopulation and resource scarcity, or alter the human body to eliminate involuntary pain and death. But we may not need to make that leap all at once. Instead, we could incrementally enhance our intelligence until we are smart enough to solve difficult problems. Consider the history of human evolution. The intelligence we now possess is the result of a completely undirected natural process that operates without any intention. And if we made a conscious effort towards understanding the mechanisms that make intelligence work, we can improve upon it at a much faster rate. And if we can create something just slightly more intelligent than us, it would be even more capable of understanding intelligence and, in turn, developing an intelligence even greater than itself. And this can be repeated as many times as necessary until we have access to intelligence advanced enough to either find the solutions to these problems or recognize that no solution is possible. And I think attempting to gain a better understanding of these issues is much better than not even trying. The goals of transhumanism may not be realized in their totality, but they may be realized partially, and any progress on these fronts will certainly be superior to the achievements of fatalism and acquiescence. Finally, there were some people who brought up various issues relating to religion. Someone accused transhumanists of wanting to become gods and said that only gods should be immortal. But transhumanism is a naturalistic philosophy. It does not recognize gods or other alleged supernatural phenomena. In light of this, the argument that we should avoid trying to acquire any qualities that religions might ascribe to their gods just isn't compelling. Transhumanism does not orient itself around religious doctrine. Others claim that the desire to avoid death is somehow religious or comparable to religion, and that the goals of transhumanism are analogous to the concept of heaven. In fact, the reluctance to die is not specifically religious, it's just plain human. Religion exploits the very human desire for life and offers comforting lies about how death isn't really death at all, it's just the beginning of a whole new eternal afterlife. Transhumanism rejects this and recognizes death for what it is, the actual and permanent ending of life without any kind of afterlife. And having acknowledged this, transhumanism simply asks, what are we going to do about it? Are we content with dying, or do we want something more out of life? If we do, it's up to us to make it happen, because it won't happen on its own. There's no point to deceiving ourselves about the situation we're in by seeking refuge in the supernatural. I can hardly think of anything less religious than accepting reality and working from there. So, I hope this has helped clear up some of the questions about transhumanism, or at least given you something to think about.